As the U.S. and China play a changing role in the global economy, what can we expect in 2011? I'm joined now by Morgan Stanley's non-executive Asia Chairman, Stephen Roach. Steve, always good to see you.
Good to see you, Deborah.
You recently moved back to the U.S. after quite a long stint in Asia. So what are the biggest misconceptions back there about China?
Well, the U.S. still sees China the way it did during the Cultural Revolution, sort of the Maoist days, and they just haven't updated perceptions about what the modern China is all about. That's one of the reasons I moved back, is to be part of the re-education process of America. And you know, I don't think they appreciate the changes that have occurred in the last 30 years and where China is going to be headed over the next 30 years. They view China as a threat, not as an opportunity, and I think that's evident not just for the guy in the street, but unfortunately for most of our politicians in Washington.
So what's the #1 question you get asked about China these days?
Well, the #1 question is why don't they move the currency up? You know, there's a general view held not just in Washington, but from some of our more prominent economists. I won't name names, but there's a Nobel Prize winner who writes a column in the New York Times on Mondays and Fridays. Why don't they raise the currency by 25, 30% to play more fairly with American companies and with American consumers?
So I take it you think that's going to be the key issue going forward for 2011?
I think it's a critical issue. The U.S. House of Representatives on September the 29th passed a bill that would impose trade sanctions across the board on China for the manipulated, undervalued renminbi. There's a good chance the Senate will follow suit in early 2011. A weakened President Obama will not veto this bill, and so this bill could become law. That worries me a lot. And then what worries me more is how might the Chinese respond? And would this take us down the slippery slope of trade frictions and protectionism? It's a big risk for China. It's a big risk for America. It's a big risk for Asia.
Do you think that there's actually a prospect for a trade war between the two countries?
I would put the possibility of a passage of this bill close to 40, 45%, possibly even higher. I think it's something that's unappreciated as a major risk for this region and for the world.
Where should the two go, in your opinion, on the currency issue in 2011?
Give up on it. It's a phony issue. America last year had trade deficits with 90 countries. We have a multilateral trade imbalance, not a bilateral problem. If you try to fix it with a bilateral exchange rate, it'll blow up in your face. So America's got to look at why it has trade imbalances with so many countries. And it's mainly an outgrowth of our unprecedented shortfall of domestic savings. In an era of open-ended trillion-dollar budget deficits, that problem is not going to go away. America's got to fix its budget deficit.
Okay, so what do you think the #1 pressing issue, challenge China will face with its economy in 2011 will be?
There's really two issues. One is more immediate, inflation. The government has moved to tighten monetary policy. It's now using a new word, prudent, to describe policy as opposed to moderately loose. But the second issue is to restructure the growth model, to move away from the export and investment-led model to one driven more by internal private consumption. Can it do both at once? My view is for the Chinese, get on with dealing with inflation immediately. The longer you wait, the tougher it's going to be to address the problem, and the tougher it will be to then tackle these immense structural issues of moving to support internal private consumption.
Okay, so at the end of the day, though, there's been issues over how accurate China's data is. So what do you believe? How accurate is the data coming out?
It's a phony issue. I mean, you know, look, no country, including China, or you might even say especially China, can nail everything going on with precision so shortly after each month or quarter ends. But the broad structure of the Chinese model is very well supported by the official data. It's a model that's been driven increasingly over the last 30 years by two sectors, exports and fixed investment. It's a model that the numbers show very clearly has enormous disparities between urban and rural China, between coastal and central and western China. The numbers show it. They may not show it with exactly the right precision, but they show the challenges that are out there to change the model to a more balanced and sustainable model. And I think the Chinese government gets it, and they're putting policies in place that will address these profound imbalances.
Okay, Steve Roach, always good to see you.
Good to see you.
Steve Roach, non-executive chairman of Morgan Stanley and Yale University professor. I'm Deborah Kahn. This is Reuters.